This can help you.
No, they're all dead.
What's the matter?
They're all dead. I came home and they're all dead.
Whereabouts are you?
Um, um, every street.
Every street.
65 every street. They're all dead.
Who's all dead?
My family, they're all dead. Hurry up.
It's okay. Every street that runs off Somerville Street.
Yes.
Phone number you're calling from?
454
Mm-hmm.
2527.
454
2527.
2527. And your last name?
Bain.
Bain. Okay. We're on our way. Okay, Mr. Bain? Yeah, we'll be there very shortly.
June 20th, 1994. The call came in at 7:10 a.m. David sounded distressed and was wailing. Within minutes, at 7:20 a.m., officers Kim Stevenson and Jeff Wiley were at 65 Every Street. The morning was cold, the darkness nearly absolute. They moved up the path with caution, their revolvers and flashlights at the ready. The house, appearing fragile and run down, loomed out of the darkness. They spotted a man through the window, presumably David, curled up and unresponsive. With the door locked, they shattered a glass panel to gain entry. Inside, they found David on the bedroom floor. As they approached him, weapons drawn, he muttered, "They're all dead. They're all dead," and pointed towards the living room. Officer Stevenson asked him how many were in the house. "There are 6 of us," David replied. There were bullets on the floor, and later, over 1,000 rounds of ammunition would be found in David's wardrobe. In the living room, they found the body of 58-year-old Robin Bain, a .22 caliber rifle by his side, and a silencer nearby. He had a single bullet wound to his left temple and had clearly fallen over from the impact. The rifle still had 2 rounds in it, and a second magazine on the floor had 3 rounds. As they explored the house, they were taken aback by the mess. The rooms were cluttered, and the smell was unbearable. They found 18-year-old Lanyard Bain under a duvet in a bedroom, 3 bullet wounds to her head. At the end of the hall, they found 50-year-old Margaret, lying in bed under her duvet, shot once in the head near her left eye, likely while she was asleep. Downstairs, they found a dirty kitchen with dishes piled high in the sink. One of the officers entered a room hidden behind a heavy curtain and found 19-year-old Aroa Bain. She had been shot in the right side of her forehead and had fallen over as if pleading for her life. Throughout this ordeal, they could hear David upstairs, babbling to one of the officers. The paramedics, now on the scene, were checking on David, who kept repeating, "The black hands are coming. The black hands are coming." His eyelids were flickering, and he complained of a headache and nausea, but his heart rate and blood oxygen levels were normal. Back upstairs, they realized they had only found 4 bodies. They split up again, and one of them discovered a door in Margaret's room that led to another room. Inside, they found the bloody body of 14-year-old Stephen. There were clear signs of a struggle, and Stephen had 3 bullet wounds to his head. Later, they would find an inside-out blood-stained white opera glove and a lens from a pair of glasses. Back in the living room, an officer noticed a computer with a single sentence on the screen. "Sorry, you are the only one who deserved to stay." Given everything they had seen, it looked like a murder-suicide. Outside, they entered Robin Bain's caravan and found a collection of murder mystery novels, a chilling foreshadowing of the twists and turns that were to come in a case that would become the most discussed in the nation and continues to divide New Zealand to this day. This is the story of the Bain Family Massacre. The Bain family was a complicated and somewhat dysfunctional unit. Robin and Margaret Bain, both trained teachers, had met at a Presbyterian church in Dunedin and married in August 1968. Their first child, David, was born before they embarked on their missionary work in Gollum, New Britain, a small island of Papua New Guinea. During their stay in Gollum, they welcomed 2 daughters, Arawa in 1975 and Laniet a year later. Robin worked tirelessly at the Teachers Training College, while Margaret immersed herself in the study of anthropology and local culture. Their home was a mirror of their way of life. Adorned with local crafts and relics, it frequently seemed chaotic and was poorly maintained due to their hectic schedules. After a few years, they moved to Port Moresby, the capital city in Papua New Guinea. Their home was known for its chaos, and the family led a bohemian lifestyle. Their children were often seen running around unclothed. Their youngest son, Stephen, was born in 1980. Margaret homeschooled the children. She attempted to enroll David in an international school at age 11, but he was bullied due to his awkward and introverted nature, so she withdrew him. Margaret sought psychological help for her family, but often disregarded the advice given. She was perceived as a controlling figure. Upon returning to Dunedin, the family was advised to consult a team of counselors, but Margaret didn't heed their advice. They eventually moved into 65 Every Street. The family dynamics had shifted dramatically. Robin and Margaret were estranged, with Margaret developing an interest in New Age spiritualism. She believed she had a connection to Winston Churchill in a previous incarnation and kept a diary ranking her family members based on how possessed by the devil they were. David was always the least possessed, Robin the most, with Laniet a close second. She referred to Robin as a son of Belial, one of the 4 crown princes of hell. David Bain himself was not without controversy. He had a strong passion for music. He joined a men's choir and later pursued classical music studies at university. However, his controlling behavior, including monitoring his sister Arawa's movements, raised concerns among her friends. Margaret was concerned about David's controlling behavior towards his siblings, as she mentioned to her friend a week before the murders. Arawa, the elder daughter, was a diligent student. She was studying to become a teacher. Despite the family's unconventional lifestyle, Arawa was doing well for herself and had a promising future ahead. However, she was reported to fear David, her older brother. She dreaded the upcoming family meeting and was uncomfortable with David having possession of a firearm in the house. Arawa had mentioned to her friends that David had threatened other family members, and she feared him. Laniet, unlike Arawa, was quite troubled. She had been living in Dunedin, but was staying at a boarding house on Russell Street. Sometimes she would stay with her father at the Tayeri schoolhouse. Unknown to her family, Laniet was a sex worker and a drug user. She was openly telling complete strangers that she had multiple abortions and was molested by her own father. During a visit to her doctor, Laniet was diagnosed with sexually transmitted diseases. When advised to abstain from sex for 4 days, she said it was not possible and reportedly received a call at the time from her boyfriend or pimp, Dean Cottle. A friend of Laniet recalled that a week earlier, Laniet had mentioned she was going to a family meeting called by David. She was planning to come clean about her secret life of a sex worker. Some even heard her say she was going to reveal to the whole family about her incestuous relationship with her father. At that point, Laniet was trying to clean up her act. She quit sex work and secured herself a job at a cafe. Laniet, like Arawa, was afraid of David. Stephen, the youngest son, was just 14 and still in school at the time. 2 weeks after the horrific incident, the Bain family's home in Dunedin was burned down by the Fire Services Department at the request of the family trust, and with David Bain's approval. They were a complicated family, to say the least, but the shocking events that unfolded on June 20th, 1994, were beyond anyone's expectations. The police faced a challenging task, reconstructing the events that led to this horrific scene. They had only one witness and a house full of clues, but also contradictions and mysteries. They found some wet clothes, recently washed and hung. They wondered why someone would do laundry on such a tragic day. Initially, investigators believed this was a murder-suicide by the father Robin Bain, who mercilessly took the life of 4 of his family members, left a note on his computer, then turned the gun on himself, but spared the life of his eldest son. Statistically, in similar family murder-suicides, 95% of the time it's the father who commits the crime. However, after examining the evidence, the story just didn't seem to add up. Here's why. Robin was right-handed, but he was shot on the left side of his head, an odd and uncomfortable way to position the rifle before shooting himself. There was no blood on Robin's socks, despite there being bloody footprints around the house and blood from the violent struggle in Stephen's room. There was blood found on his track pants and a speck on his fingernail. However, these were believed to be from Robin bleeding on himself, but they were never analyzed to have their source confirmed. The bloody glove found in Stephen's bedroom belonged to David, and why would Robin wear David's gloves if he was going to end his life anyway? Besides, Robin had a pair of leather gloves in his campervan he could have used instead. There were no traces of gunpowder found on Robin's hands, and he had no fingerprints on the weapon, despite the fact that he wasn't wearing gloves when his body was found next to the weapon. The rifle used belonged to David and was usually kept in his room, along with a spare key in a jar that was required to obtain the rifle's trigger unlock mechanism. David had said that he was the only one who knew where the spare key was kept. So if Robin was the killer and David was not involved, Robin would have had to obtain the weapon, ammunition, and magazines, find the spare key, the trigger unlock, and the opera gloves from David's drawer before conducting his killing spree. Then when he was done, he would head to the laundry room, change his clothes, wash them, and hang his previously bloodied clothes to dry. After which, he would head to the computer room and type a message which would say, "Sorry, you are the only one who deserved to stay." Despite being an English teacher and known for his love of reading and handwriting, he would type this one sentence on the computer in past tense. According to friends and family who knew Robin, they expected at least a personal or poetic touch from his last message ever written. Lastly, despite being right-handed, Robin would shoot himself to the left of his head in an uncomfortable position or use his left hand to pull the trigger. Miraculously, despite not wearing gloves, there would be no fingerprints on the rifle or traces of gunpowder on his hands. Robin would also have to do all this while his eldest son, David, was out on his newspaper delivery run. Robin used to live outside in the caravan and only entered the house at 7 a.m. to pray in the living room. David's newspaper run would start around 5:45 a.m. and he would be home by 6:45. This would be the window for Robin to commit his crime, if he did it. People that knew the Bains commented on how David did not have a good relationship with his father and would side with his mom. So why would Robin choose to spare the son that least liked him? To the police, David seemed the only logical suspect, and David Bain was arrested 4 days later. There are further reasons for his arrest. David's statements were riddled with inconsistencies. He claimed to have found his mother first, then his father. Yet during his emergency call, he stated,
"They're all dead."
On the day of the incident, David reported arriving home at 6:42 a.m. after completing his paper round. He dialed the emergency number at 7:09 a.m., leaving a 25-minute gap unaccounted for. During this period, he recalled going to his room, visiting the laundry, washing his hands, returning to his room, and finding his parents. He told the police he had episodes of blackouts and couldn't remember anything. David had unexplained injuries, including a forehead wound, a knee scrape, reddened knuckles, and chest scrapes. The police theorized these injuries likely resulted from a struggle with Stephen. In Stephen's room, they also found David's bloodied opera gloves, a lens on the floor, which coincidentally matched a pair of glasses in David's room, which was missing a lens. A green sweater, washed by David that morning, was found to have fibers matching those under Stephen's nails. Initially, David claimed the sweater belonged to Aroa, but later stated it was Robin's. This same sweater appeared to have made blood smears on the house's door frames. Stephen's DNA was also identified on the clothing David Bain was wearing when the police arrived. This contradicts David's statements that he never went into his siblings' room that morning. Blood droplets were found on David's socks, and 5 bloody sock footprints were traced from Margaret's room to Laniet's room and back. This footprint evidence played a significant role in the case. David's behavior after the murders also made him look guilty. By speaking with Awara and Laniet's friends, it was revealed they feared David. Also, Margaret had spoken to her friend, telling her she requested David to lessen his control over his siblings, reminding him that he was not their father. She confided in a friend about her worries for David and his hallucinations. A few days before the event, during choir practice, David left his seat and retreated to a back room. He removed his glasses and fell silent into a trance. He later claimed to have no recollection of the event and said he blacked out. These incidents marked a peculiar shift in David's behavior. Also, a postmortem conducted by Dr. Dempster revealed that Robin's wound was a near-contact wound. However, the bullet's angle and trajectory through Robin's head made the suicide theory seem unlikely. The position in which the rifle would have to be held to achieve that angle would make it difficult to reach the trigger. Could it be that Robin was shot when kneeling to pray at 7 a.m. by David creeping up on him from his left side? The trial of David Bain started in May 1995, almost a year after the murders. The prosecution argued that David killed his mother, 2 sisters, and brother before doing his paper run at about 5:45 that morning. They said he fought with his brother, Stephen, which caused his injuries. According to them, David woke at 5 a.m., accessed the trigger lock from his spare key, loaded and assembled his .22 caliber Winchester semi-automatic rifle and silencer, and then to kill his family members. A struggle with his brother Stephen resulted in Stephen's strangulation and the dislodging of a lens from David's eyeglasses. David then washed the green sweater he was wearing, left for his paper round at 5:45 a.m., and returned home an hour later. He then typed the sorry note on the computer and then lay in wait for his father to enter the house as he usually did at 7 in the morning. Whilst he was praying, David crept up on him and shot him in the head. This is consistent with the position of the computer room and how Robin's body was found. David then called emergency services 25 minutes later.
You're all dead.
The prosecution questioned David's claim of hearing his sister Laniet's gurgling sounds, suggesting he was present shortly after she was shot. May 29, 1995, David was convicted after a trial that spanned 18 days. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, without possibility of parole for 16 years. David maintained his innocence throughout the trial, and a growing number of people believed him. One of his strongest supporters was former New Zealand All Blacks professional athlete turned entrepreneur, Joe Karam, who called this the greatest miscarriage of justice in the history of New Zealand. People claimed that there was no clear motive for David to commit the crime, and a lot of crucial information was dismissed from being heard at the trial, such as Laniet's alleged sexual abuse by her father, Robin Bain. Revisiting statistics in crimes such as these, 95% of the cases where both parents were killed, the perpetrator was the father, and only 1% of the convicted was the adult son. Was this New Zealand's 1%? Lastly, in these cases, there is a triggering event, which we will now examine. An appeal for retrial was approved by the Privy Council in Britain, which for New Zealand cases before 2004 was equivalent to a Supreme Court. Then 13 years after his conviction, the defense was given an opportunity to present evidence not allowed at the original trial and to challenge the earlier findings by the prosecution. June 2009, the defense presented the case of a two-faced, deeply depressed man who was having sex with his own daughter and feared she was about to tell his family and the rest of the public. He snapped and decided to kill his family before the truth would be discovered. As there were rumors, Laniet was about to tell everyone about their incestuous relationship at their family meeting. If this is true, why did he spare his son? We may never know. The defense team had a formidable challenge. to persuade the Privy Council that David Bain did not kill his family, but instead it was his father, Robin, who did it. They presented 9 key arguments to support their claim. First, they cast doubt on Robin's mental health before the tragedy. He appeared to be a respectable citizen, but a shocking discovery at his school exposed a darker side. His office was a disaster, full of unopened mail and dirt. But the most horrifying thing was a newsletter he had sent to the parents, containing horrific stories of family slaughter written by his students. Did he inspire these violent fantasies? And what did they reveal about his own twisted mind? Second, they questioned the absence of a motive for David. The prosecution had never shown any evidence of Laniet's alleged abuse by Robin, which was supposed to trigger his fury. On the contrary, several witnesses testified that Laniet had confided in them about being sexually abused by her own father, Robin. Could this have been the reason why Robin snapped and killed his family? Third, they pointed out the mystery of the bloody footprints. They were found in Margaret's and Laniet's rooms and measured 280 millimeters. The police assumed they belonged to David, who wore socks that day, even though his foot was 300 millimeters and Robin's 270 millimeters. The defense argued that the prints were actually Robin's and that he had changed clothes after the killings, leaving the bloody garments in the laundry. To prove this, they conducted an experiment with David wearing a cow's blood-soaked sock and walking on a carpet. The result was a 306 millimeters print, much larger than the one at the crime scene. But the original carpet was destroyed when the house was burnt down, and the evidence was lost. The Privy Council agreed that David could not be the owner of the prints, and that Robin was a possible suspect. Fourth, they disputed the time when the computer in the living room was turned on. The prosecution claimed that David had killed his family before his paper round at 5:45 a.m. and then returned at 6:42 a.m. The computer was believed to be turned on at 6:44 a.m. by David, who typed the infamous message, "Sorry, you are the only one who deserved to stay." But the defense showed that the computer could have been turned on as early as 6:39 a.m. when David was not home yet, suggesting that Robin could have done it. The Privy Council concluded that this evidence was too unreliable to prove David's guilt. Fifth, they contested the time when David arrived home. A witness named Denise Laney said she saw someone resembling David at 6:45 a.m. She thought her car clock was fast, and the police confirmed it was correct. But the defense claimed that the jury was not told that the police had checked Laney's car clock and found it was accurate. This meant that David arrived home 5 minutes later than he originally said he did, which meant he did not turn on the computer at the time stated. It also meant that he had less time to stage the scene and make the emergency call. June 2009. 2 years later, David Bain's retrial commenced at the High Court in Christchurch. The prosecution team had a strong case. To prove that David Bain murdered his family on the morning of June 20th, 1994, and to reject the defense's claim that Robin Bain, a depressed and frail man, was the killer. They challenged the defense's account for David's opera gloves, stained with blood found in Stephen's room, and argued that the fingerprints on the rifle showed that David used the weapon on the day of the killings. They also presented autopsy results that showed Robin's bladder was full with concentrated urine, indicating he had not urinated before the murders. The defense countered that stress could make someone ignore the need to urinate, and that Robin's slightly enlarged prostate could have retained urine in his bladder after urination. They further disputed the fight with Stephen, claiming that Robin had healing hand injuries from doing property repairs. But Australian pathologists' analysis, as reported by Joe Karam, showed severe injuries on both of Robin's hands and knuckles. David Bain's defense team argued that Robin Bain, not David, was the family killer and suicide victim. They criticized the investigation for focusing only on David and poorly preserving evidence. Forensic testing showed marks on Robin's right thumb, consistent with gunpowder residue from reloading a rifle. However, to date, this is still disputed by other forensic experts, and some believe they look more like cuts, likely from abrasions caused from manual work around the house that he was known to do. The defense argued, despite being right-handed, Robin could have shot himself in the left temple, as demonstrated by forensic firearms expert Philip Boyce. Blood-soaked footprint tests showed David's 300 mm foot. Bloodied sock prints averaged larger than the 280 mm prints at the scene. The footprints on the scene were closer to Robin's 270 mm foot size than David's. May 27, 2009, at 9 a.m., the jury had returned after deliberating for nearly 8 hours. At 12:45 p.m., the verdict was read. David Bain was acquitted on all 5 counts of murder in what is New Zealand's most costly trial to date. He spent 13 years in prison and was finally a free man. In 2012, retired Canadian Supreme Court Justice Ian Binney reviewed the case and criticized the Dunedin police's investigation for major errors, suggesting a settlement for Bain. Key mistakes included not testing Robin or David's hands for gunshot residue, destroying potential evidence from Robin's fingernail scrapings, and prematurely burning down the crime scene, which destroyed vital evidence like the carpet with footprints and Laniet's diaries and letters. The absence of timestamps on photos and videos also raised doubts about the lens found in Stephen's room. Justice Binney's investigation and interview with David Bain have been widely debated. His recommendation, seen as biased towards Robin and lacking consideration of all evidence, was rejected by the New Zealand government. On the other hand, retired Australian Judge Ian Callinan's report contradicted Binney's findings, asserting that David Bain's innocence was not proven at the retrial. Bain received an ex gratia payment of $925,000 on the condition of no further legal action, indicating continued government skepticism about his innocence. This case has sparked a lot of controversy and split public opinion on whether the first trial was fair or not. Some think that Laniet's accusations were not trustworthy or verified, and tarnished Robin Bain's reputation without proof that he ever abused her. In fact, Robin Bain's brother, Michael, has said no one ever heard about Laniet's abuse, and he is disappointed that David has not spoken out against this. They also think that the events on the day are illogical and wonder why a father who would kill his family would spare his son and do all the extra things he did, such as the laundry, using his son's gloves when he had his own, and leaving a message on a computer instead of writing one by hand, and finally shooting himself in the head at the angle that he did. It almost seemed like he wanted to frame his son or leave it a possibility. On the other hand, David's loyal supporters like Joe Karam think that a huge injustice has finally been rectified. What is obvious, though, is that the initial police investigation could have been more thorough, collected more forensic evidence, and not let the house be destroyed by fire just 2 weeks after the crime. It left many questions unanswered and open to discussion, which continue to be disputed amongst experts in the field. What is your opinion on what really happened that morning of July 20, 1994? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you're not already. Check out my other cases on screen. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and always seek the truth.